One of the biggest ways of decarbonising is to get all of these low carbon tech installs done. You've got these really aggressive government targets. We're way short of that.
I was going to a lot of meetup groups for green tech. I basically turned up and said, "Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I quit my job to work in green tech. Anyone got any suggestions?" I've come from a team of 300 and now in a team of 6. I'm amazed at how much faster that lets us iterate. We're developing against an API. In the span of 2 weeks, we've iterated on the UX to a point that, in my opinion, it exceeds the thing that we're building an alternative to already.
We're able to look at their entire end-to-end process, but we're able to say that's the opportunity, which means that then they can scale these installations faster. We've had some really interesting conversations about what the average consumer might be able to do to reduce their emissions. What are you doing? What would you recommend?
I went pretty deep on this. The biggest surprise one for me was...
Matt, Bessey, thanks for joining me for a chat. You've recently joined the Payaca team as our Chief Technology Officer, our CTO, and it'll be really exciting to talk about your aspirations for the role and your ambitions for the impact we can make.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, happy to be here.
It'd be really interesting to talk about your backstory, how you came to be here, and really what your ambitions are while you're at Payaca.
Yeah, first of all, can I just say, good to be here. Thanks for having me. My origin in the industry was a computer science degree. I was one of the many teenagers that was like, I'm going to be a games developer. And my brother said, don't do that. I mean, maybe do that, but do a computer science degree, keep your options open. And so thank you, Richard, if you're out there. Yeah, now I've gotten into web development and been in there ever since. So much software is web these days. It's kind of taken over the world. Yeah, moved from the assisted living industry in the US to cybersecurity here in Bristol until quite recently. I think the thing that drew me to Payaca really was that in about 2020, when climate became vogue, I think around then, we started, Greta Thunberg was suddenly front page news all the time for many reasons, unfortunately. Yeah, I certainly her messages resonated with me, and it got me into doing a bit more research about how I could have an impact, not just perhaps indirectly as an effective altruist or something like that, trying to just give your wages to high impact charities and things like that. It was the first time I thought, well, maybe even as a software engineer, I can have an impact. The thing I did was to read through the International Energy Agency, the IEA's net zero emissions by 2050 report that they'd put together, I think, a year or two before that, and that I think they keep it up to date to today. I would highly encourage any of the listeners to read through the report. It doesn't sound particularly interesting to say read through a 100-page or so report, but it's actually not super dense. There's a lot of graphs, and it is a technologically realistic but optimistic roadmap to achieving net zero by 2050. I'm sure people will question whether it's doable, and I myself am not so sure that we'll hit 2050, but it certainly posits a way to do it with technology that either exists today at scale or exists at experimental stage. It's not a report saying by 2049 we'll invent fusion and then we'll just roll that out and it'll be fine. It's very hands-on or based in reality, I should say. And yeah, I read through that, and my big takeaway was software has a huge role to play in that industry, in our industry, in decarbonising. And I thought, well, I'm a software guy. I can get into it. And so I've just made a list of all of the areas that in the report that come up as big areas of growth. Decarbonising heat pumps, kind of the world we're probably closest to, virtual power plants and kind of distributed grid systems and solar and wind installations, like managing, we're going to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of solar panels and wind farms. They're going to need IT systems to manage them, and just started doing research on how could I get into that space. So yeah, sorry, long answer, but that kind of led me to where we are here with Payaca. You reached out to me a few months ago, and I was super excited to discover that within a 10-minute bike ride from my house was a company that totally fit the bill, who was looking for someone with technical leadership skills that could help the company out.
I mean, that's super interesting. And I think going back to like when I first messaged you, I think that the history of Payaca, we started very much in an industry agnostic way. It was construction, and we thought we could help solve those very much like organizational challenges and process challenges. But like seeing that, on your profile, you write a lot of stuff about how you're kind of a net zero enthusiast. And I think it was becoming clear to me at that time that there was a particular segment of the customers that we were serving that felt like we could make even more an impact and allow us to focus and really get behind a cause and have a very clear mission. And I think as I learned then more about it, I could see that in this industry, there is far more impact Payaca could have. A lot of these businesses are like pretty new, so actually the legacy tech or legacy sort of systems jump that we were sort of experiencing before, where businesses were working on pen and paper, then jumping to a sophisticated tech product. That's too much of a jump. But actually, for these newer businesses investing in renewable solutions, we could help them more. But also, like, the process is so complex. There's like a lot of compliance to handle that we can help solve. There's so many different skill sets, potentially as part of even like one project, even a domestic project, that will require different skill sets at different stages of that project. So then you've got all these different people to manage, to optimize availability. It just all came together as an opportunity for Payaca. And then with like you being really focused on that area, right? I think like for us, it's super exciting that you've come into the business now, and we're able to kind of make that investment on really focusing on this area. Going back to your like early experience, like you sort of touched on it that you're in the US, but it'd be interesting to hear a bit more about that, because I think you were sort of in Silicon Valley in like a very interesting time. Like what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, great question. So for a bit of background for the listeners, in my final year of university, or not even, I was on a 4-year master's degree in my third year. I found an internship program that was explicitly for getting computer science student graduates or undergrads out to startups in Silicon Valley, a spectrum of them, organized by a guy named Mike, who works for LoopUp in London and San Francisco offices, maybe more these days. But big shout out to Mike for getting me out into the valley. Yeah, signed up. It was the first year it had ever run. I think it's run yearly ever since, plus or minus COVID, and got out there with a bunch of guys I didn't know, guys and girls I didn't know from all around the UK, at different universities doing computer science. And we all just kind of jumped into working at startups in the Valley in 2014. You could sneeze in a coffee shop and a VC offers you $1 million in seed funding kind of phase, just loads of money sloshing around, and loads of great and bad startup ideas sloshing around, but just a real buzz in the whole city. And it was really amazing. We talk about things like Silicon Roundabout and these terms in the UK or all around the world. People will be like, oh, well, Berlin is the Silicon Valley of Germany, or Silicon Roundabout is the Silicon Valley of London. But when you're living there, you appreciate that a valley is it's a big structure. It is not a street. It is not like a borough of a city. It's 20 plus miles of highway where you're on a raised highway looking left and right going, okay, there's like a Google campus bigger than Bristol University. There's the Microsoft campus. There's the Apple donut thing. Every billboard is like selling you Twilio APIs or selling you QuickBooks APIs or advertising developer conferences instead of like, Coca-Cola ads. There is so much tech in one place that you are like the norm. You are the default consumer in that area, and it completely changes how the place works, how things work. So that was incredible to be in, and to be surrounded by other people in the same position just meant that for a good year, I was just living with other startup tech people. So we were just, probably looking back, didn't have the healthiest work-life balance there, and it's not something that I'd want to do it now that I'm 33, but at the time it was perfect. Like I learned so much from every element of the tech stack and the product side of businesses of reading the lean startup and getting into understanding what an MVP is and product market fit and all these things, and like doing hackathons on the weekend and making toy projects with your roommates. It really, I owe my career to it. And in fact, I dropped out of the degree I was on because I was like, this, they pay me. They pay me, and I'm learning a lot more here in the last year than I have done in 3. So fortunately, Bristol let me get an undergrad out instead of just not getting any degree, which is really, really nice of them.
Well, so any potential investors listening, like dropping out of your uni degree to go and like build software is, I think, quite a good signal. So
yeah, it's true.
So what was the point that you decided to leave the US and come back? What triggered that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say love was a part of it. I met a girl when I was to and fro the US, managing work visa stuff. I met a lady who lived in the UK. She was my landlady at the time, funnily enough.
Nice.
She is my age. And so, a good part of it was we both spent a bit of time in the US, but she didn't have work status to stay longer. And I didn't want to say goodbye. But that wasn't entirely it. Like San Francisco is a city torn in half by tech, by its prosperity. Like America is already a fairly a country with huge inequality problems, and nowhere. I'm not saying I left because I found it unpleasant so much as I found existing in a society that allows that to be the norm uncomfortable. Like knowing, I can afford healthcare and I'm the one that doesn't have to pay for it. Like that comes as a company perk, whereas these people, obviously are deserving of more support from the social state than they're getting here. And I didn't want to be a part of that anymore, really.
So I guess that was like one of the key catalysts for leaving the US, and now you're back in the UK now. Like how do you feel about the tech scene in the UK? Do you think it's something that is is exciting, getting more exciting?
I think so. Certainly, I was anticipating when I moved back. I worked remotely for a bit, for a good year or two, thinking, oh well, I want to live in Bristol, but I'm not going to find equivalent places to work here. And far from it. Like there is no denying it's a lot smaller. I think mostly it's just that there's a lot less money sloshing around from VCs rather than there's plenty of software engineers. But yeah, there's certainly a good startup scene here, like London, no question. But Bristol, we've got like lots of Runway East, and there's a few other co-working spaces that are filled to the brim with early stage tech companies, as well as some more established players in the city. So yeah, I think we've got it. I wish we had more of it, and I don't think there's really any reason for us not to, other than there isn't enough funding going into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that really helps, and is one of the reasons that perhaps like the US, of course it's bigger, like has got that real acceleration, is that you kind of need some big exits, because then that creates more potential like startup founders who've got some money, and it kind of like sort of continues a cycle. Probably just not have enough of those, although obviously London, a fair way ahead of Bristol in terms of like, it's much bigger. There's perhaps more sort of tech and investment going on there, but like even in the few years that I've been working on Payaca, I've seen more and more funding come into Bristol and other sort of cities outside of London. So I think like once you get going, I think you're off to the races. I think in London it's easier to get started. So the first like business that you joined when you came back to the UK was that Immersive Labs?
Yeah, that's right.
So they're security.
Yeah, cybersecurity training would be the succinct way of putting it.
Yeah,
not very exciting. It is
really
very
important.
Yeah, it is quite an exciting product, but I think that as soon as you say security, I think people switch off a bit.
Yeah, but they do like to know, I guess, if they are either Payaca users or potential Payaca users, they do like to know that security is is important to the business where they're trusting their data. And I think your background in that certainly helps. But then, so you left Immersive Labs before getting a sort of a contract here, didn't you? So what kind of things were you looking at then? It was very much like renewable energy, net zero focused.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, a bit of it was a time for a career break. I'd been in the industry for a good 10 years straight without a major amount of time off. But I knew that I wanted to move into the green tech space. And ideally, I was seriously considering founding. I thought, well, I've been playing the role of like a cross-functional principal engineer for a few years. Maybe I can, that's a skill set that lends you very well to being a technical co-founder. You don't get the luxury of picking which hat you're going to wear in an early stage thing. And so I thought that would work out nicely. And so, I was looking into a few options. One of them was the Carbon13 incubator that first of all, I should say, I was going to a lot of meetup groups for green tech. There's some really good ones in Bristol, like Green Tech Southwest, very supportive network of people there. I basically turned up and said, "Hi, everyone, I'm Matt. I quit my job to work in green tech. And anyone got any suggestions?" I wasn't actually as lacking of a plan as I maybe seemed at the time, but it was an amusing moment. And a lot of people there recommended to me Carbon13, which is a Cambridge-based startup incubator with I think, quite unusual setup of you're not expected to go in as a team with an idea. You're certainly encouraged to have an idea, but there's not much expectation that what you go in with will be what you do. You're going in to build your team. You're meeting people from across sales, marketing, products. They vet for engineering the best environment for you to find the right team to work in, specifically in green tech or in there's all sorts of terms for that industry now, I suppose. But accelerating, getting to net zero emissions. So I couldn't have been a better fit for me, really. I was like, I don't have any network. I want to get into it, but I don't know the right people, and I want to work in net zero. And then a bunch of people come along and say, "Oh, well, here's an incubator designed just for that."
Yeah.
That was one consideration for me. I applied to it. I did get accepted, but I just didn't think that the odds of moving to Cambridge for a bit, going through the ringer with a bunch of people, fighting for the best talent, fighting for funding, fighting to get my team to locate back to Bristol because I love the city. I was like, there's no chance that is worth the risk. So I very happily took on the Payaca job.
Yeah, and I think it was about that time, like I say, where I was really starting to realize the impact that we could make at Payaca. So then I was able to really talk about, ultimately, like the biggest ways of like decarbonizing is to get all of these like low carbon tech installs done across like domestic, commercial, and the fact that you've got these like really aggressive government targets, but like we're way short of that. And if you look at the reasons why we're short of that, it's because it's so hard to scale installations across the millions of properties across the UK. So then it felt like, well, actually, we can make a huge difference there because we're making efficiencies across the entire end-to-end process. So we can help anything from a business that's got, 15, 20 people up to potentially like the large energy suppliers who are rolling this out at scale. I think for me, it got me really excited about it as well, bringing you in. It's kind of all come together at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. I've only felt like a better fit as time's gone on, as even in the time between when I took the job and now we've moved further into that renewables space or low carbon technology space, and it's been great to work on.
We've had some really interesting conversations about what the like average consumer might be able to do to kind of reduce their emissions. Like what are some of the like your top tips for what people could do? And I guess like maybe if that's too vague a question, like what are you doing and what would you recommend like others do?
Yeah, so I went pretty deep on this when it was in vogue in 2020, 2021. I did a lot of research on it. I think I was, in Bristol, probably about half of the population are already kind of thinking of like climate conscious thinking about these things, or like changing their behaviors to what they assume or believe will reduce their impact on the world. And I found, a couple of sources that really changed how I applied behavioral change. So there's a book called Food Without the Hot Air, I think it's called. And also Hannah Ritchie, who works for Our World in Data, writes a Substack and also has a book out, but I haven't read the book yet. But her blog on Substack by Hannah Ritchie is incredible. She's a data scientist by trade, and basically it's similar to me, data scientist that was getting tired of climate doom and gloom and wanted to like see how data could like find positive stories or prove existing positive stories that people had the wrong rhetoric about. A lot of my behavioral changes have come from them, and I'd say the biggest surprise one for me was like this idea that eating local is certainly beneficial or likely to be beneficial for the environment. It's not really backed up in data. Like people will feel very guilty about, it's so vogue to go into the supermarket and be judgmental about, oh, look, this tomatoes come from the Netherlands, that's bad, or this avocados come from South America or something like that. And it's very intuitive, right? Oh, well, it's traveled really far. I know that ships run on bunker fuel, so that sounds bad. So it must be really bad to for me to eat food that's transported here that way. But actually, it's largely not true. If you account for the amount of stuff that you can fit on a container ship and the amount of petrol that you might be using to, for example, drive to your local farmer's market instead of walking to your nearest shop in an urban environment, then you don't have to drive far for it to be actually worse for you to be driving to your local farmer's market to do your weekly shop than to eat food from far away, which I was really surprised by. The exception, I should say, is anything fragile has to be air freighted, and that completely changes the maths. Like if you're eating berries or things with a really short shelf life where they can't just put it on a container ship and flood it with ethylene or whatever it is to make it ripen at shore arrival. So strawberries and blueberries and all the berries, they have to be airshipped, and so that generally avoid berries out of season is good advice. But everything else, vegetables and hardier fruits, it doesn't matter where they come from. It matters that you don't waste it. Like eat it all. That would be my advice on fruit.
Top tip, unless it's really off. We don't want to recommend that people.
Try not to give yourself food poisoning. But don't necessarily respect shelf life dates, because those are completely arbitrary. Like use your nose, use your eyes, work out if you think something's gone off, not just because the packet's told you it's gone off. Yeah,
I think the one I had a bad experience once with carrots, which I thought, well, there's no way carrots can possibly be off. But this was when I was a student. Like, this would never happen now. But they developed this slime.
Oh yeah,
and apparently a slime on top of that's you really should avoid that.
If the food that you're considering eating does not look like the food you believe it should, then maybe
we don't want to get sued. What about meat?
Fine.
What's your views on meat?
Don't eat beef is really the highest impact by far. Or don't eat beef or dairy products, like stuff or reduce your intake at least of those things. So if I was to replace all of my protein in my whole diet with cheese or with chicken, the cheese diet would actually have a higher impact, even though that's a vegetarian diet, right? Okay. Because cheese is concentrated milk, and milk is high impact, whereas yogurt is not concentrated, it's just transformed by bacteria. But cheese, the harder the cheese, the more the multiplier on the carbon impact versus the same quantity of milk. Whereas chickens are just incredibly efficient at turning chicken food into chicken, like terrifyingly so for a biological organism. And so, chicken is not so bad. Obviously, this does not account for the moral impact of eating animals. This is very much focused on climate.
Impact,
but if climate is your focus, then it's good to learn a bit more about how, what the actual carbon impacts of different animals are. It does vary a lot, and there are some non-animals that are surprisingly high, like dark chocolate and coffee beans are both very high impact for their. It's a bit of a cheat, because you usually measure per 100 grams, and like I don't know about you, but I could maybe eat a 400-gram steak. I probably wouldn't eat 400 grams of dark chocolate in one sitting. And the same for coffee beans, right? Like a little goes a long way. But yeah, food without the hot air, I think, is the we can put a link in the description.
Yeah,
or something.
absolutely. Nice.
It's a good read.
Top tips. So let's talk about one of the key things that we have been working on like the last few weeks. I mean, for people that don't know, one of the businesses we're partnered with is Vito Energy. So they do their own in-house installs across heat pumps predominantly, but also like solar, batteries. They've done everything. I know they've done like hydrogen boiler installs as well, but really focused on heat pumps. But also they operate MCS, so microgeneration certification scheme, that allows a network of installers to operate and within the MCS framework, which kind of protects the customer and ensures that installations are done to a high quality. And one of the things that became clear to us that we could add value on when we were looking at that journey is the when a new low carbon tech connection is made to the grid, you have to apply to the relevant DNO to get approval. And then we discovered that there was a new API created by the ENA Energy Networks Association. So that's something that we've been working on the last few weeks and are very, very close to release. Do you want to talk about how that's been to work on and kind of how much value you see that delivering to the process?
Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised to discover that is the kind of thing that we could just directly integrate with. I guess it's not government, but certainly with the national grid. Ultimately, is where we're integrating with the individual network operators, the district network operators, the DNOs, that then ultimately impacts the stability of the grid itself. Yeah, it's not been entirely smooth sailing. We're in the QA stage at the moment, so maybe this is slightly fresher in the mind than
when you see this. It'll be live.
Yeah, it's gonna be beautiful in a few days. Yeah, first of all, it's quite impressive what the ENA has released. They have essentially an API where we can state what low carbon technologies an installer, a customer of ours, is interested in offering or installing in their customer's house, and then tailor a form compliance form that they must fill out to the DNO to what that person is intending to install. And that's quite a lot to handle. The form is not short. It requires specific serial numbers of hardware that both is being installed and hardware that is already on site at the customer's house, which kind of surprised me. But I guess the thinking with the DNO is, well, we need to know that the sum of all low carbon tech in the house is going to draw few enough amps that it's not going to cause issues. So it makes sense that we have to support that. But it was quite a lot to build if we were to just build out a UI that supports all of that ourselves. What we're instead able to do, thanks to the design of the ENA's system, is be given a schema, if you like, for what we need to show to the user and what the user needs to populate, and how to validate that information is plausibly accurate, at least, before we send it back to them, and then programmatically generate all of that. So that's the approach we've been taking as much as we can, and it's working pretty nicely. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some teething issues, which perhaps to be expected of a brand new API, and we have fed back to them. Hopefully we'll start to see some improvements there. But
it seems to be well received, so I think we can be hopeful, although one of the challenges for us is going to be if they start to improve things, likely there's going to be breaking changes we're going to have to keep up with. But we're invested in this. We want it to be better for everyone. Obviously we want it to be better for Payaca users, but we're not out there to be like this is just for us. This is
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were forthcoming with our feedback, even though I guess if we were feeling Machiavellian, we could have kept that to ourselves, and our competitors have to deal with the same bugs. But no, we're good here.
So I guess by the time people are listening to this, that feature will be out there. But I think just to briefly summarize like the impact. So like previously, people would have had to probably do a paper application, find out who the right DNO is, like send it off, wait for feedback. Now, within Payaca, they've already got all the customer details, they've got the project, they see where it is in the pipeline, and they're able to go, make a compliance application. We're going to pre-populate a bunch of the data for them because we already have that within Payaca, and that will actually be able to like improve on that over time and add more and more to it. Then they're able to like quickly fill it out, save progress, because one of the other bits of feedback that we were hearing was that it's great to like if you've got all of the information in front of you, you can do the application. But if you don't, like, it can take time. So we're saving the progress, also saving like if anything goes wrong with the application, the other side, you've got it saved. Then when you make an application, it's just simply clicking a button in Payaca. And also the other thing that we were looking at yesterday that looks really cool is the live status updates. So hopefully they get approved within like
a minute,
yeah. But like you're seeing like live updates, like at what stage of the process it gets to. And then the other thing I've not mentioned is, I guess, like when users are out in the field collecting photos and things that are required as part of this application, that's automatically been stored in your Payaca account, and then you just select from the images that you need. And the API seems to be quite smart, as in like it will assess the quality of that image and either accept or reject it. But if you needed to redo it, then you'd have all that data saved, kind of ready to do it next time. So it's like excited as you can be about a feature, a compliance feature. I think it adds a lot of value, and I think this is something that I talked about at the start with our kind of being partnered with Vito Energy and other low carbon tech installers, that we're able to look at their entire end-to-end process, which with them we've like mapped out to the nth degree, but we're able to say that's the opportunity, that's the like causing the most like manual overhead, which means that then they can scale these installations faster. They don't actually need as many people to like do the manual work, so they're scaling. So don't worry about if you work for them. I don't think they have any intention of getting any smaller, but they'll be able to grow installs faster without needing to necessarily hire loads of people to do a load of manual work, which would take more time. Which means we can really help the government and the UK and potentially the world to like meet those targets and really have a massive impact on decarbonisation. So yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know, I was going to say, just to add to that, we know that from the work we've been doing on this API that new regulation is being introduced. The API is saying that we're about to have to do, so this is a pre-connection compliance before doing the installs, but they're about to make required for all generation applications a post connection commissioning information submission, which they're also providing an API for. So hopefully, in time for that being required, we'll be able to roll that into our interface as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, what are your ambitions for your role at Payaca? Like how? Where are the limits?
I love helping tech teams like operate effectively. I'd get a tremendous amount of joy from being a force multiplier in engineering teams. So identifying where processes and technologies are like not necessarily slowing us down, but we could be doing it better than we are, and helping facilitate that. I just find tech like very interesting. I've been in the software world for a decade, and I find like keeping up to date with the state of the art interesting, and that often means that you know about a thing other people don't know about, and you can have an impact that way. But that's true, would be true of anywhere I worked. I think here specifically, I'm very excited to be first order helping with the net zero transition. So being able to like keep an eye on our analytics dashboards and see keep an eye on our sales reports, seeing how many customers we're helping, but also how engaged they are. And there will be a time in the future where we'll be able to say, oh, I know that I've saved this many person hours of time because I know that we've 10,000, DNO reports have gone through our system and have been automatically approved or something like that. And so I think being able to like put my impact on my personal beliefs into rock hard numbers is like really exciting.
I think that's really exciting. I think it's something that we've not done yet and that we really should do, because like we can actually measure like number of installs that have happened and then translate that into the actual impact in terms of like how much that is decarbonising. And I think it'd be really exciting to sort of pull some of that together. One of the challenges that Payaca faces now, I think, is we started with smaller businesses and we are moving our way up the scale. And I think one of the things that's becoming increasingly obvious as a focus that we can add a lot of value to is the area of scheduling. Have you had any thoughts about how we can approach that area?
Yeah, I think we're in a good position now where as we get more information from a business, or as businesses get more invested in the platform, we have an awareness of all the projects that they have in their pipeline, the locations of the customers that those are associated with, and historic data from our mobile app of how long in practice those projects or stages of those are actually taking. And you could take that stuff together and with a bit of machine learning magic be optimizing, as they'd call it in computer science, the traveling salesman problem. How do I most effectively route my people in the shortest route and accounting for how long they need to spend at each spot, such that they spend the smallest amount of time in their day working on in dead air, waiting for something. Sorry, that's a very software engineering answer, but to put it in more plain terms, avoid wasting time based on what we know is true, and even be able to throw in a bit of AI magic and suggest to our customers, hey, you've got this event that you expect to take this amount of time, but historically it takes less than that. Do you want to change the amount recorded for future occurrences of that event?
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And I think there's a bunch more variables in there that we've not even touched on that I think allow us to like iterate on that model as well, to just get better and better at that. I mean, you're dealing with like the customers actually being available. You're dealing with like those different skill sets that we kind of mentioned earlier on, and the complexity of a project, and materials need to be ordered and arrive on site at the right time or be picked up somewhere. There's just so many variables there. And the good thing about that is it, as I say, we can get better and better and better at solving that problem. And it is probably one of the key things. I mean, I do think our mobile app does a very good job of being simple and easy to use and take the user through a linear journey when they are on site. So they know what to do, so they can tick tasks off as they go, so they can fill out those forms in the field very quickly, work offline and take images and videos, and all that uploads back. And then our business customers like in the office can share that with the clients. I think that works very, very well, but actually getting the right people to the right sites optimally is a super exciting challenge, I think, for us. So what's it been like going from a much bigger team where you were previously? Because I think the businesses and certainly the business you were at before was much, much bigger. How have you found that transition into a role at Payaca where, right now there's 6 of us? Like, what's that been like?
Mostly it's just been astonishing how much we can achieve. I've come from a team of 300 and now in a team of 6. I'm amazed at how much faster that lets us iterate. Not like throwing shade or anything. It's just that
it's harder with more people, right?
It's hard. It's the lines of communication. Yeah. It's just more challenging to even find time when everyone can talk, let alone get them talking. Take this ENA project, for example. We're developing against an API where, as well as an API, they have a front end for this service that we're effectively implementing an alternative to. We've used their tooling, identified shortcomings UX-wise of their system, like, not saving your progress, and it's been quite easy to completely lose all the information you've written in when you realize, there's one field I don't know the answer to. I'll just have to keep the tab open until I can find the engineer that's on site. In the span of 2 weeks, we've built an equivalent product, iterated on the UX to a point that, in my opinion, it exceeds the UX of the thing that we're building an alternative to already. I mean, that would have been a quarter project in previous roles I've been in. So, it's been really amazing to see how quickly we can move as a small team.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that like I'm very conscious of, keeping the team as small as we can, as long as we can. And because like just those lines of communication, when you start to grow like much bigger, you say you've got 20, 30 people, it becomes like infinitely harder to actually get stuff done. Clearly, like we can't scale forever at like 6 people, but I think it is, for me, so much fun, because we can just make decisions so quickly, we can develop new things so quickly, and yeah, it's just like a really exciting place to be. And I think you've complemented the team, massively, very, very quickly. So thinking about growing the team, like what are some of the qualities that some of our current team have that you think really contribute to our ability to move at the kind of speed that we are able to move at, and how would you kind of communicate that in terms of someone who is looking to join Payaca? What do they need in a role like this?
I think my first answer would have to be that attitude. I think it's from Facebook, like the idea of there's no such thing as someone else's problem, just this kind of scale, and it's a good thing to have in life anyway. But it's so, the reason we can move so fast is not that there are fewer people, it's that there are fewer decision makers on any given thing. If we get stuck on something, we're all in the same room and we just go through it and go, okay, I have a front end problem. Maybe I'm normally a full stacker. Well, I'm going to get more focused on front end today to deal with this. And so, yeah, having that attitude of, is there a way I can get past this wall without waiting for someone else to be free or waiting for an expert. Maybe you come back to it later with an expert who can help you out. But being up for believing in yourself and pushing yourself beyond what is maybe your comfort zone, and realizing that actually there isn't that much difference between that thing that you are comfortable with and that thing that you thought you weren't. And that'd be my number one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of plays to like one of our key values is taking action. And what I'd say to anyone, like, I am more than happy to like make a decision if you bring me a decision to make, but also I want people to feel empowered to make decisions. Ultimately, all we want to do is make progress as quickly as possible. If a decision is reversible, just make the decision and crack on. And I guess just for context, the other two values that we've had consistently for years now, and we've not felt the need to change, even with our mission being more refined, is like transparency. And I think that helps. That's all about communication, right? If we are more transparent, if we're able to document processes, whether that be like really informally or formally, just making it easy for others to continue the work that we're doing, is very important. And the other one I've always been big on is simplicity. We should always challenge ourselves to say, can we make this simpler, whether it's a customer, like a user experience, or whether it's the code that's being written, whether it's like the business logic that we're applying. There's nearly always a simpler solution. And I do think it's a challenge that it's not a challenge that I believe that the team right now has, but I do think there is a trend among like software engineers can get very caught up in the like wanting to build like really elegant solutions and like smart code and all of that stuff. But sometimes, remembering that being really focused on solving the customer's problem then helps you go, right, okay, well, how do I most simply get there? And I think everyone that we've hired so far has been very focused on that, and I think it's helped us immensely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Coming in, I got pretty familiar with the tech stack. Even I think I just asked to have a quick look at the code, and you gave me a company laptop before I signed my employment agreement. So thank you for that. And yeah, in that time, I got a good familiarity with the code base, and it's very clear that a focus on simplicity is at the heart of the team already. And as you say, that's not the trend in the wider industry. I think people are going, oh, how can I use that cool tool that Facebook made when, that's a company with 50,000 developers who have completely different problems to you. And you should be thinking, how can I use no tool? How can I not write any code for this and not have less to worry about?
It's super exciting. So I think like for us, like in terms of what we're looking for and the businesses that we want to bring in, we're really looking at like heat pump businesses installing heat pumps, solar batteries, and EV charge points. And I think those are the businesses we can help immensely with what we're creating. And I'm sure there will be new low carbon technologies developed that the benefit of the way we've designed Payaca is we can easily flex to that. So since you've been in the team, I think one of the other things that's been interesting is we've been able to, I want to say expose you to, but introduce you to and have you very involved with our customers. Like how have you found that so far?
Yeah, very, very useful. I mean, we've been working on the ENA integration with Vito Energy, who our immediate use will be our first customers of it, who already have to deal with those manual flows we were talking about earlier. And to be able to go from a design to something that we've implemented that we can show them, between weekly calls and get immediate feedback, even just, from us screen sharing that, oh, your assumption there is wrong. Or, we're not installers, right? By our trade, while we want to make their lives easy as possible. And as much empathy as I have, I need that closed loop that previously would have gone via a business analyst and all these other roles that now I can just
not an agile coach as well, just in there.
Yeah, throw in an engineering manager. Yeah, so there's been plenty of steps removed, and it's been really useful for me. And Patrick's a nice guy, and the team of Vito. So it's been very useful and gratifying as well to see. I'm working in cybersecurity training. You're pretty far removed from the bank that has an employee who needs to upskill on the latest compliance. I'd never hear any feedback really directly. To be able to look someone in the eyes and go, like, I've done something good for you is really gratifying.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to it's one of the, I can't say it's the only reason why I do what I do, but just like in the journey of the last 5-6 years, just being able to say to a customer, hey, this is something that we do, and them to say, wow, that solves my problem. Like it never gets old. It's always exciting. And so Vito Energy a sort of example of a customer that we're really, I think, serving very well at the moment. And to give you an idea of what they do, so they install predominantly heat pumps and through directly in-house and through their network, but also like solar batteries. That's really the types of businesses that we're looking for more of, because we can see the value that we've added with them, and we really can see how we can repeat this process and look to help scale other businesses across like heat pumps, solar batteries, and EV charge points as well is another big one, particularly through the compliance side, the API that we've just released. I'm saying that because we definitely will have released it by the time anyone is watching this. But yeah, you can make applications for any of the low carbon technologies out there. So for any businesses like that, I'm sure you would welcome the challenge of directly working with more and more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. From what we've been talking about earlier in the podcast, that is that's my passion. Anything we can do to accelerate the climate goals that we've ambitiously set ourselves.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is whilst Payaca solves the core problems, and that is really that operational hub, we're starting to work with more and more specialists within those specific industries. So, whether they're doing heat pump surveys, estimates, solar designs, we're plugging those systems into Payaca and giving you that kind of one single source of truth for the business, but also the end customer. And the work that we've done around the client portal, I think, is super exciting, because I think it makes it so much easier for the customers to see all of the documentation that they need to see, because actually there's a lot of stuff that needs to get handed over, and they can access that all in one place, as well as all the bookings, and that all kind of fits together really well. So it's interesting to kind of continue to build on that. So being that system of record for the business, for the customers, and it means that in future the customer's gonna approach a business like historically, like any business would have experienced this. A customer that he works with a few years ago says, "Have you got that document?" For them to have a way of going, well, yeah, just put your email address in like the client portal, log in, get a link, go there, get it. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the dream, I think, would be with this ENA stuff in particular is like one installer comes to do an installation and we can say, don't worry, we already know what's in that house.
Yeah.
Because someone did an installation through the Payaca platform previously.
Well, thanks very much for your time. That's been really interesting to talk through so many different topics.
Yeah, thank you. And I can't wait to see what we do next.